Good evening and welcome to Vantage Point. A lot of us make investments in life. Some of them are fairly major. The decision to purchase a house, for example, is a major investment, probably the largest investment that a family or an individual will make in their lifetimes. The decision to purchase a vehicle is also important, and that is a large investment that often we don't pay sufficient attention to, at least not the same kind of attention that we pay to purchasing a house, for example. We want to share with you some thinking that suggests that the decision to purchase a vehicle is as major a decision as you might make in your life, and requires a certain kind of approach, a certain methodical approach, a certain amount of information and knowledge, so that the investment becomes and remains a good one, a good experience for you. We have with us in studio today someone who's been trained professionally and has worked professionally. I guess most of his working life has been devoted to automotive engineering and mechanical engineering. And he's somebody who can provide the kind of guidance, the kind of insight, the kind of information and knowledge that I believe would benefit all of us who have made decisions to purchase vehicles or plan to make decisions that would lead us to purchase and invest in a vehicle. I want to welcome to our studio this evening Mr. Dave Corriette. Welcome, Dave. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Artie, for having me, and good evening or good afternoon to your viewers. I'm certainly hoping that they will enjoy the show and benefit from some of the information that we'll share here over the next couple of segments, if it.
Well, I have no doubt that they will, because a lot of mistakes are made in investments that people make in all kinds of things, business and otherwise, and certainly people often don't consider an investment in a vehicle something worthy of the kind of input that comes from somebody like yourself. So we do look forward to your input, and we're going to take a short break forward from the sponsors, but when we come back, we want to have a conversation with Dave that will allow us to sort of become smarter investors in this thing we call our vehicles. We'll be right back after this word from the sponsors. Okay, welcome back, and Dave, we're back, and we're here with viewers, many of whom own vehicles. But if you asked the average person, what was the process you went through in making that kind of decision, they would not probably want to recall that process, because for many of them it would have been a very cavalier kind of, very, not careless, I don't want to use the word careless, but it might not have been a serious kind of investment decision. But before we do that, Dave, let's talk a bit about you, a bit about your professional backdrop, your professional training, your professional experience. What brings Dave to this point in his life where he's managing and operating, in my personal view, a really, really high level, one of the best automotive repair maintenance operations in the country?
Well, thanks for the compliment, Artie.
Absolutely, and you didn't ask for it. Let's be clear for that.
What brings me to this? Necessity. As you know, the employment landscape in Dominica being what it is, I found that at some point back in the late 90s it was necessary, if I was going to continue to be able to support and maintain my family, to employ myself and to do so as gainfully as I could. And so I had no choice. Not that I had no choice, but I chose to re-enter the field of automotive technology, which is where I am trained most strongly, I think. So I opened my own business here in Goodwill, and since then, about 1998, we've offered to the public pretty comprehensive automotive maintenance and repair services. Not only automotive, but we do a lot of industrial machinery repairs and maintenance to generators and heavy equipment and And we've even been called out to Melville Hall Airport and to Canefield Airport to provide emergency services to aircraft.
Okay.
So
you do some of that as well?
Well, I can't say I do some of that, but I mean, we have been called out to do stuff.
All right. Okay. Let's talk a bit about the kind of training that you alluded to in your first statement, right? I mean, how important is that training in kind of preparing you to do what you do today?
Well, like with everything else, training is key. You must have some background training. Is that the correct word? Background training?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It in this field of automotive technology, the rate at which the process of manufacturing a vehicle has changed, the components involved in vehicles today as opposed to 10 years ago, requires that you have some training, some formal training, because there are systems on there that are just radically different from the old car as we know it.
So that an auto mechanic trained 25 years ago and working on cars then would not, if you will, be able to be competent in servicing some components?
Some components, yeah. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. It would be necessary for him to become current with, like I say, some of the more electronically managed systems on the cars, particularly, and the transmissions, even some of the drivetrains, for instance, automatically select the mode into which the car operates, in which the car operates, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. So you have to familiarize yourself with those aspects of things. But the basic operating principles of the internal combustion engine and the gearbox and the brakes and so on remain the same. And so an old non-formally trained mechanic is capable of dealing with those kind of issues. But with the more modern vehicles, you can train yourself. Okay. There's always that possibility, you know, which we do here a lot. I mean, even at our facility, we do a lot of our own training by reading. You know, the internet, of course, provides us with a lot of information, and so we have to. We're forced to stay abreast. We have to stay abreast if we want to stay in the industry.
Okay, the vehicle. The private individual wanting a vehicle, and of course there's a company, a commercial company wanting a vehicle. What from your experience, what is the process that the average person goes through when they're buying a vehicle, when they're making that investment? What are they seeking to do with that investment?
Well, I don't know if there's a straightforward answer to that, because you have young people being, I think, the largest buying sector right now of vehicles. And young people look for looks and performance, you know, sporting stylish images and sporting performance in a vehicle. And quite frankly, I don't think they are daunted by the fact that this may be the only vehicle of its type in the island. That doesn't trouble them. So, on the contrary, I think that probably entices them to purchase the vehicle. But that is where some of the problems crop up. The older buyer or the more mature buyer, I would think, looks for a vehicle that is more practical in terms of it suiting his family needs or his commercial needs, as the case may be. And then, of course, the commercial buyer is a totally different class of.
But this is clearly a major investment. Let's stick for a moment with the young person. They have an average type of car, stylish, high performance car, may cost them what, 40,000, 50,000. 60,000?
Some of these guys pay a lot more.
Pay a lot more than that. Okay. So this is kind of equivalent to a major investment.
It is, whichever way you look at it.
What are some of the mistakes? You've mentioned one already, that the person wants the only car of its kind. So if something happens to that vehicle, it's the only one, and maybe parts become a problem. Let's talk a bit about some of the challenges there.
From the automotive manufacturer's point of view or standpoint, perspective, the world is carved up into several markets. From the Japanese standpoint, they have the Japanese market, or what they call the domestic market, the Japanese domestic market. Then you have the Asian market, which, while Japan is a part of Asia, they have a separate market which is referred to as the Asian market. Then you have the European market. There may also be the African market. And there's the general export market under which we fall.
Okay.
And there's the American market, of course, North American market.
Okay.
Now, the specifications for every one of these vehicles varies.
According to market.
According to market.
For example, give us a
For
practical.
example, okay, let's use the general market since this is the market in which we exist.
Yeah.
A vehicle manufactured for the general market, you may readily find the spares available at the local dealer.
Okay.
Whoever that local dealer is, he may or may not have the parts. There's a good chance that he may have the parts in smaller volumes than he should, but anyway. However, the same vehicle manufactured for the Asian market, for instance, or the European market, identical in appearance and everything, the parts may not be available for that vehicle. And you as a buyer, having taken the decision to buy a used vehicle made for a different market and import it into here, you have to be cognizant of the fact that when the time comes for you to find spare parts for that, you're going to have a problem.
And these spare parts could be kind of run-of-the-mill parts that will require replacement from time to time. Okay.
I mean, the basic things like, generally, things like the oil filters are very, very similar across the board.
So they're interchangeable.
And oil filters are fairly common, easily obtainable and so on. You can generally find a substitute oil filter that will fit, but anything else, just about brake pads, belts, hard parts, engine parts and so on. If you have a catastrophic breakdown, can be very difficult and costly.
So one of the first considerations for somebody making that investment is be aware that you really need to be purchasing a vehicle that was designed for your market segment. Or
it would be, I think it would be a better economic decision, a better financial decision to buy a vehicle that was manufactured for this market than to... Because there's another issue in that, obviously, if you can imagine that there are so many non-general export vehicles being sold here, it presents an opportunity for the parts supplier. So the parts supplier steps in and attempts to provide the non-general export parts. For these vehicles are referred to as grey market vehicles.
Okay.
Because they could come from anywhere. They could be a vehicle manufactured for Asia, Africa, anyway. So they're called grey market. So the independent parts supplier attempts to step in to provide the parts that will fit these odd vehicles. And those parts are generally manufactured by individuals or entities other than the original equipment manufacturer.
Okay. So they may not...
Those are referred to as aftermarket parts. Generally, these parts do not meet the specifications of the original equipment manufacturer.
So they're not what we call genuine parts. Okay. We're going to take a break, Dave, because I want to let the points that you've raised so far sink in, because this is certainly one, and there will be other considerations that I'm sure Dave will raise to us as we decide to make this investment. Be aware, I wasn't, that there are different market segments, and cars are designed and maybe manufactured to serve these different market segments in ways that could help decide whether this turns out to be a good investment or a millstone kind of investment around our necks. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Dave about how we can avoid making some of these mistakes when we're making that investment in a motor vehicle. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and as you can see, this conversation has already proven to be quite revealing and as far as I'm concerned, very helpful. Dave, you were making some points before about the connection between the knowledge that you bring to that making that investment and some financial implications already in terms of what it might cost you to just keep that vehicle operational. Let's continue a little more on that. I mean, more expensive, less expensive, if you purchase from the right market or the wrong market grouping?
Well, one of the things about buying a grey market vehicle, as I was saying earlier, is that the parts, and I'm talking about all the parts. We have hard parts and we have soft parts or service parts.
What are hard parts?
Hard parts are like the parts which form parts of the engine, for instance, internal parts of the engines, camshafts, crankshafts, bearings, seals. Service parts like oil filters, belts, hoses, and so on. These things are generally interchangeable from one mark to another, and one model to another, from a Nissan to a Toyota. You can get a hose to bend and flex. You know, you can get a belt to stretch a little bit. You can adapt things. But when it comes to the hard parts, there's some of those can be done. One seal can be substituted for another. But for instance, you can't substitute a crankshaft from one vehicle to the crankshaft of another vehicle. You have to buy a specific crankshaft. With a grey market car, that can be very difficult to do, to find. And even, let's not even go that far, even the service parts. Some of the service part belts, for instance.
I mean, they're that specific to...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they're getting more and more so. So you have the question of the cost of ordering these things when they become unavailable from the local parts dealer who's trying his best to provide you with grey market, non-genuine grey market parts. If he doesn't have it, then you have to order the thing. And you have to order it from Japan, my friend, or from the UK, and bring it in FedEx or DHL or some overnight courier. The cost is phenomenal.
A lot of that is happening to people.
A lot of that is happening. Lots of that is happening.
Okay.
And people recognizing that they don't have a choice, they don't bat an eyelid. They just go ahead and order their part.
So a fairly significant amount of cash or money, besides the cost of the purchase of the vehicle,
It's being exported.
It's being exported, and that kind of, if you rewound, if you paid attention to your market segment and the importance of buying in your market segment,
You could avoid all that.
you could help avoid all
Absolutely.
that. Okay, so
Absolutely.
so that, I think that's extraordinary and very, very helpful advice. What about the cost of vehicles? Is there much to choose from, or is everything much of a muchness these days? If you bought in your segment, are you going to get good prices? Or is it smart to do your own buying? Is it you know? Let's talk about these current things that you, as an automotive engineer, are confronted with every day with your customers.
Well, one of the things that the Japanese market offers, the used cars out of Japan, that market, is a wide variety of marks. And when I say marks, I mean brands: Nissan, Toyota, Subaru.
Okay.
You can take your pick in terms of manufacturer, Japanese manufacturer. In the general export market, in our market, in Dominica, I mean, what are the chances of you finding a used vehicle in decent condition for purchase?
Good question.
A general market, a vehicle manufactured for this market in a used condition and in good condition, that is, almost impossible. Unless you find some gentleman who's migrating or family who's leaving the country who has happened to purchase one and has hardly used it and taken good care of it.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because we don't have the volume. We're a small island, and we just don't have the volume of vehicles. You could probably get I wouldn't even go that way. I was thinking that might be able to get a used general export market, but then we're talking about right-hand drive, and this is a very specialized market, and
Yes.
it's small. It's small, and we're far away from anywhere, really, you know. So there's very little chance of you having the option of buying a used car which was manufactured for this market in a used condition, in good shape. And that is where the Japanese market comes in. That is why people gravitate towards it. You can get a good used car
But built for another market segment.
built for another market segment at a sometimes decent price.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. Let's talk a bit, Dave, about some of the common complaints, issues that confront the person who has taken the decision to buy maybe out of their segment, or even buy in their segment, and what could be done. What has been your suggestion to those people? Hey, guy, if you manage your vehicle in this kind of way, you probably wouldn't get these kinds of problems. Could we talk a bit about that? You could pick any issue that you wish.
Well, the decision to purchase, once you make a decision to purchase from the grey market, my advice to anyone is to go with a reputable seller. There are those.
Okay.
Okay? You need to get a seller in Japan or wherever who is reputable, who can offer you the service of verifying the condition of the vehicle before you purchase it. Because there have been quite a few incidents where people have purchased vehicles and when they've gotten here, the engines are no good, or the transmissions are no good, or they have some other inherent problem that is very, very costly. That can be avoided.
Okay. So there's a way around that, and it's, as you say, going to the reputable suppliers.
Because we bring in vehicles ourselves, and we've never had an issue like that.
Okay.
Never. All the vehicles that we've bought in have always been in top shape. Good condition, cost a bit of money, but they've been in good condition.
But in the final analysis, it's actually cheaper and better to do that.
You take a very big risk when you choose to buy a vehicle based on a photograph. You know,
Which is essentially what that independent buyer person is doing.
And some of them get lucky and get a good deal, and others get really, really, unlucky.
Yeah. But what are some of the common, issues? You mentioned transmissions. You mentioned what are some of the common things that go wrong with a bad purchase, with a bad investment on a vehicle? Yeah.
Well, we can't talk about a bad investment unless we look at it from the point of view of transmission failures. Because even if you pay too much for a vehicle and when it gets here you like it, there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's not a bad investment as far as you're concerned.
Right.
But some of the things that do happen is that, like I said, the vehicles get here, they don't run properly, the clocks have been turned back. You think that you're buying a vehicle with 60,000 kilometers on it, and it turns out that the seller has been so reckless in selling you that vehicle that he has forgotten to take the under hood sticker, which clearly states that the last time in belt change was at 120,000 kilometers. And when you get into the vehicle, the clock shows that 60,000 kilometers.
Right.
So naturally,
that's a worn engine. That's a worn vehicle.
All kinds of things are possible. So, but if you're happy with it, then there's nothing wrong, I guess. People buy those vehicles, and they endure all sorts of difficulties with them. We can enumerate some of them. Timing belts, for instance, break. The engines are worn. The vehicles begin to smoke. There's a whole bunch of stuff can go wrong.
Is there anything peculiar about the conditions under which vehicles have to operate, let's say in Dominica, that actually would make it even more important to be very careful with your investment? I mean, it's a hilly terrain. It's it's wet, it's dry, it's hot. Climate issues, start and stop. Are these considerations, from where you sit, important for a person to take into account? And
Yeah,
how
to some
does the
extent-
average person do?
To some extent, the vehicles are not that radically different that that the operating conditions here would impact on their overall performance in any significant way. Except for the start and stop issue that you mentioned. In Dominica, a person can own a vehicle for 10 years and have less than 20, 30,000 miles on it.
True.
You know? And that vehicle can be engaged in going just from Goodwill to Roseau for those 10 years, with an occasional trip maybe to Point Michelle or to St. Joseph or whatever.
Okay.
So, and stop and go driving is as hard, if not harder, on a vehicle than long distance, constant speed driving. It's actually harder.
Okay.
It's actually harder on a vehicle than constant, high mileage, not necessarily high mileage, but higher speed driving. One of the reasons is that during the cold operation of an engine, the fuel system is enriched. Fuel delivery into the vehicle is enriched. So the vehicle is actually fed more fuel than is necessary.
Okay.
And that is to satisfy the driver's need for a good running vehicle during the cold period. Remember that the vehicle operates at its optimum when it's fully warmed up.
Yeah.
But the manufacturers have understood that you, the owner,
Once you start, you want to go.
vehicle to start and go one time.
Right.
Warm up and that again. So he has made it so that the vehicle is enriched, the mixture is enriched, and so you can get where you're going, and the vehicle will warm up during that period. Well, if you're only driving from Goodwill to Roseau, you can imagine it's not going to get much of a chance to warm up.
Right.
So you'll be dumping fuel into the excessive fuel into the system, and that can cause some problems.
Okay. All right. When we come back after this break, we want to look a little into the money implications, the cost of operating vehicles in Dominica, what can be done from a maintenance standpoint, why is regular maintenance important? It's like maintaining your body, okay, maintain your car. And when we come back, we'll chat with Dave about those kinds of operating protocols that he believes make sense to lengthen the useful life of your vehicle, as well as to, in the case of a commercial venture, let it be a useful part of that commercial activity. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and I want to segue, Dave, into this business. It's something you have told me as one of your clients many times. You said the importance of regular maintenance, checking things, making sure that you know how your vehicle is supposed to operate, so you can get a sense as to why is it smart? Why is it good? Why is it just good sense and good economic sense as well to do regular maintenance on a vehicle?
Well, I think like with everything else, your body, for instance, you need exercise, you need the proper diet, you have to go to the bathroom regularly, and your vehicle is no different. Your vehicle needs attention. Maintenance is what we call it, and that attention and maintenance is generally very easy to achieve. It's actually prescribed by the manufacturer of the vehicle and comes in the form of a booklet, which comes with the vehicle when you buy it.
You think a lot of people read those booklets just as a little footnote? Everybody does, you think?
The people who buy new vehicles, again we go back to the general export thing. When you buy a new vehicle,
Right.
it comes with a handbook. And the new thing is a novelty. The handbook is in English. I believe that the people who go through the trouble of buying a new vehicle here do read it, yes, and probably are more successful owners than those who buy a vehicle and the handbook is in Japanese and they can't read it.
Yeah.
That's a problem right now,
It is.
especially if it's a first-time vehicle owner. So going back to the maintenance issue, it's prescribed by the manufacturer, And it's generally expressed in very simple language. You know, the recommendations are usually that every 3,000 miles, for instance, you change your engine oil and filter, that you lubricate the lubricating joints wherever they are, or the rotating joints. You know, adjust your belts, change your coolant, you know, adjust your tire pressures, check and adjust your tire pressures, check and adjust your transmission fluid and levels and so on. Those things are there in black and white for vehicle owners to see. And those vehicles who do not have the handbook available to them, that information is readily available on the internet, for instance. You know?
Okay, so you can seek, find, and then
of course,
print.
go on the
follow.
internet and you can Google or use whichever search engine you use to find vehicular maintenance practices and print it out if you don't know what they are, and have them as a reference, and just follow that, and basically you can do a pretty good job of keeping your car in shape, you know, yourself.
Okay. And that leads us to raise the question of how does the absence of regular maintenance affect operational safety of a vehicle? Things that can go wrong. I mean, so often, and often tragically these days, you hear of accidents. These appear to be driver error or driver issues, but some accidents probably have to do with some mechanical issues as well. Things not working as well as they should be or as they should. Are these important considerations for us in Dominica?
Certainly. In the automotive industry, and in fact in all industry, even in industrial settings, you find department managers or vehicle owners or whatever who take a decision to run their equipment to the point of failure before they repair it. It's not an uncommon practice. It's not, actually it's a practice that is recommended in some circles, right? You run to failure because the alternative to run into failure is to stock and do preventative inspections and change components before they fail. As you can imagine, that can be expensive. It's more expensive than if you run the component to the point that its failure is imminent or it fails. For instance, you start hearing anything knocking or screeching, and then you know it's going bad, and you change it at that point. If you don't, however, then you run into the public safety issue. You can be a threat to public safety if you operating a vehicle whose wheels are screeching or whatever, whose brakes are screeching, whose undercarriage is banging and knocking away, and you've decided that you are going to continue to drive it in that condition until something breaks or gives or falls out, and then you know, oh, that's the part that's bad. And this is where the issue of public safety comes into play, you know, because you are then, you know, threatening the lives of the passers-by and pedestrians.
But this then raises two issues into my mind. One is the issue of insurance coverage, and the other one is the issue of, you know, deciding what is a road-worthy vehicle, and our licensing process and procedures. And you know, let's talk a little bit about that. Your views on that.
That's a ticklish one, you know, because that's a ticklish one.
Let's tickle each other.
Yeah, because as you know, in Dominica there is no there are no stringent inspections of vehicles performed. I mean, let's face it. You go to the licenses department, the fellas, I suppose they do what is prescribed by the internal regulations. I don't know. But what is required is
what should be done? I mean, you lived in North America, you trained in North America, you know what happens up there. But what should be done minimally? What would you like to see as a engineer?
I think the general public would benefit from a more thorough inspection.
Okay.
At that point, during the licensing process of all motor vehicles operating on the road. I mean, do I need to say more?
The what?
Do I need to say more?
Yeah, yeah. I want to get into some examples. For instance, why would it be important for that to happen, and why is it done in some countries and not done in other, and not done here, for example?
Well, I suppose it's a question of economics in Dominica. For us to move from the stage that we're at now in terms of the inspection of vehicles prior to licensing, and to move to the next stage, which would require us to do a fairly comprehensive inspection of the vehicle, would require some infrastructure. For one, the licensing department would have to establish a facility to do that. And they would probably need more than one facility, because it would require that the process, if the process is being carried out in Roseau, in Portsmouth, in maybe Castle Bruce, for instance, that's 3 stations you'd have to have equipped with the personnel and the equipment to carry out those inspections. But I think we're at the stage now where that wouldn't hurt, you know.
No, I mean, I seem to recall, maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, in the US, where I've spent time, there were inspection stations that were both privately operated on behalf of the motor vehicle department, but and also the motor vehicle department had its own inspection stations. So people were licensed inspector locations, so you could take your vehicle in there and they would give you the okay or tell you what needed to be done. Yeah, before you go to license. I mean, isn't this an option?
Certainly.
Yeah. Because you already have people, you know, who've set up pretty decent operating auto mechanic servicing centers in many parts of the island. And the reason I'm dwelling a little bit on this is because of the safety issue. I mean, all of us know of people who have lost, died, become disabled or whatnot, and otherwise been grievously inconvenienced as a result of...
Well, even from a national standpoint, you know, it can and does affect some of the international benefits to which we have access. And for instance, when you think about the what they call the carbon footprint thing, emissions and so on, by virtue of the fact that we don't subscribe to the sort of EPA mandated pollution controlling measures. Given how much importance is put on your contribution to the world's emissions, I am certain that it could only do us well, you know, or do us good, to be one of the first small countries of our size, to clearly demonstrate to the world, like, hey, you know, we have these environmental considerations in place. Because that is one of the areas that concerns me personally.
Absolutely.
Is the emissions that I see being expelled by some of our vehicles here.
Let me put some figures in front of you. There have been years where we've had over 300,000 cruise visitors. Easily, half of those people went on a bus ride. 150,000. Question of safety arises not just for us, but safety for the economy. And you know, God forbid something happens, you know, with any one of those people, as there have been 1 or 2 incidents in the past. And so even the imperative, that's why I was dwelling on it, is that the imperative is hard, it's economic, and as the competition for these visitors and hence contributors to our economy becomes more intense, then it makes an even stronger case for what you've been advocating here. And so I just kind of wanted to underline that in addition to the carbon.
And that's a valid concern.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take another break in the conversation. When we come back, I want to take Dave into an area which is what I call the googly area, where he may not be entirely prepared for this part of the discussion, but you know, whether or not he's ready, He's a good batsman. He's
Get my pads on.
Absolutely. So we'll be right back after these words from the sponsors. Welcome back, and this is our final segment for this show on Vantage Point for our conversation with Dave Corriette, which you must admit has opened up for me, and I trust for many of you out there, some fresh insights into this thing, motor vehicle. Everybody wants to stylize and show that they are in keeping, in tune with, in sync with the modern times. But I want to ask Dave, if we were to look ahead 10, 15, maybe even 20 years from now, what I could ask you two questions. What is the likely scenario if things just remain as they are? But also, what would you want to see as being a more kind of sensible approach to the business of transportation, vehicles in Dominica, and what are the things likely to affect those kinds of decisions that we're going to make? Is the cost of money going to affect it? The cost of insurance? Is fuel prices going to be the driver, the final determinant? What's the future going to be like for Dominica when it comes to motor vehicles, cars, trucks, pickups, whatever? What do you see?
Well, the world, and I'm talking about the Western world, has had this romance with the vehicle. We've all been aware of that. Particularly America, and unfortunately we pattern our lifestyles here in Dominica after the American lifestyle. I don't know how that happened, by the way. So we have not been left out of that. We have this romantic relationship with the motor vehicle. We like to drive everywhere we want to go. I personally prefer to drive myself. If we're going to Pocasset now, I'll tell you I'll take my own vehicle because I like to drive myself. And the same obtains with most people. They want to drive their own car because when they get ready to leave, they want to leave. I mean, we can make a plan here that we'll both leave at 5, but
things change.
It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
So we've had this affair with the motor vehicle, and I don't see that changing radically within the next 20 years. The trend is now that the young people are the ones buying cars. Like I was saying earlier, they buy sports cars so that they can zip around and style and have the convenience, track the girls and so on. I don't see that changing. Insofar as the number of vehicles on the road, that is, I think, magnified by the fact that our road network in the population centers in Dominica has not been expanded significantly. Okay, we've had the new link road, we've had a couple of new roads around the place, but when you stretch that over a period of 30 to 40 years, there really hasn't been any new development, say, that would allow the vehicles to be concentrated in a larger area. And I'm saying that cognizant of the fact that we've had Wallhouse expand Roseau and Castle Comfort expand Roseau. But while these things have happened, the artery from Wallhouse to Roseau has not changed over 40 years or 30 years. The artery from Mont Daniel to Roseau hasn't changed. And so all these suburban communities which have sprung up have not led to any enlarging or expansion of our road network. So the number of vehicles on the road now, it seems just unmanageable. And I think that is one of the reasons. I don't see people taking a decision to reduce their desire to own their own vehicle unless it becomes such a responsibility, such a serious responsibility, that any failure to comply, let's say, with a regulation or policy, traffic enforced policy, would result in a significant fine or loss of use of the vehicle, for a significant amount of time.
Okay.
And I say that because I'm going back to the issue of compliance with inspections and so on.
Absolutely.
Let us assume that a vehicle was required to be to meet an emissions test, for instance. And as you know, there are a lot of vehicles driving around here emitting black smoke, and they would fail. So, failing that would require having been accosted by an inspecting officer for failing the emissions test, would require you to bring the vehicle into compliance. And that, I can tell you, will be a significant cost.
Will be expensive.
Yeah. That is one of the ways I can see the number of vehicles on the road being reduced. Because there are a lot of them, even those that you don't see smoking, which will be out of compliance, because I can tell you a lot of them have had their emissions control systems modified and disabled.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean...
What about the issue of the impact of insurance coverage, the impact of bank finance, and the impact of the cost of fuel for operating vehicles? How could these affect the future population and use of vehicles?
Well, the insurance issue would require, again, more stringent inspections for the purpose of insurance. Right now, if your vehicle starts, turn the key and it starts, pull up the handbrakes and it stops, and turn on the lights and they come on, honk the horn and it blows, turn on the turn signals and it comes on, qualifies you for
coverage.
All
Okay.
right. I mean, come on. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more to it. So if these guys get serious and they start, doing some serious inspections and assessments of the vehicles, and revealing the true value of the vehicle, for instance, then it's a different story.
You've lived long enough, Dave, to see the price of fuel. What's the lowest price of fuel that you recall in Dominica?
I'm afraid if I answer that might reveal how old
it will date you, but it's okay.
No, actually, I'm not that old. I'm quite young.
Yes.
I think I remember paying less than $5 a gallon.
Okay, I remember paying 98 cents a gallon.
Yeah,
so
well,
that dates me.
Let's put it this way. It's been so long. I don't remember actually. But I remember I used to ride a motorcycle and filling up my tank for like less than $5.
Yes. So and we are paying today 13 per gallon.
$15 and
$15.
$15 and
yeah.
91 cents.
Yeah, $15.91 a gallon. So one can anticipate events completely out of our control affecting that price significantly.
Absolutely.
Middle East events.
Look at what's happening today.
Yeah.
The price of gas could go up tomorrow by 100%, depending on what happens in the Middle East today or tomorrow. And so, yes, that could affect, that will affect how all these cars you see on the road now, whether they continue to be on the road tomorrow or the next day or the next month. But that is a really radical kind of change over which we have no control.
But it will affect us
I'm
directly.
thinking that we're discussing this thing more from the point of view of what can we do as a people, as a nation, to control the number of vehicles on our roads, bring them into compliance with the international safety requirements, and protect our environment, ensure the safety of the foreign passengers on our public transportation and so on. And with regards to that, it will take us taking a lot more responsibility for them.
And in addition to that, the point you've been making all along in the course of our conversation, turning the people who make the investment in a vehicle into smarter investors.
Absolutely.
Who are aware of the importance of maintaining value, safety, and getting more out of the vehicle in a way that sort of keeps them alive and well. That's the point you have been making. Well, Dave, any final thoughts? We have a couple of minutes left.
Any final thoughts? There are no final thoughts in this matter. I mean, this is a discussion that could go on. This is a discussion that could go on forever and ever and ever.
Well, in fact, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because this is a discussion we plan to continue.
Not that it's that far-reaching, but there's so many things we can talk about. You know, there are a lot of things we can talk about. We haven't discussed the motor vehicle from the industrial standpoint, for instance, the dumpers and the big concrete trucks and the semi-trailers that we see on the road.
Absolutely.
The tractors. We haven't discussed any of that.
Yes. Well, you know, and this is a note to our viewers. We plan to have at least two, and it looks like we're going to have 3 more conversations with Dave Corriette here, because we plan to take Dave out, or he plans to take us out into the workshop and actually show us, you know, hot and heavy, what he means when he talks about issues of safety, issues of maintenance, issues of vehicle choice, even issues of styling. I would want to ask you about what does a 45-year-old look for in a car as opposed to a 22-year-old, etc. And how do
depends on who that 45-year-old is.
Exactly. And so we do intend to have more conversations with you, Dave. Thank you so much for this first one, because in truth, in fact, you've laid out for us a template that we can build on in the future. We can have insurance people come and join us.
Absolutely.
And talk about
and there's several other technicians
absolutely
out there that we could invite
to join us in this conversation, and
contribute.
that turns you into a co-host as well.
Wow.
You know, and and certainly people from the banking community, people involved in supplying fuel and parts, because you know this is hopefully at the end of the exercise we want you to see this as an investment that you're making. A $60,000, $150,000 that some of you have invested in vehicles is major. Thanks again, Dave. Thank you so much for allowing us into your business place and
thank you, Afi.
Keeping us going.
Anytime. Man.
On that note, I want to say thank you to the viewers for watching this issue of Vantage Point. We'll be back with Dave Corriette and other guests in the near future.